The Smile is a band consisting of Radiohead vocalist Thom Yorke and guitarist Jonny Greenwood, along with Sons of Kemet drummer Tom Skinner. They formed in 2018 and worked during the COVID pandemic, releasing their first album, A Light for Attracting Attention, in 2022. They followed it up with two albums in 2024, Wall of Eyes and Cutouts. To promote Wall of Eyes, the band released two music videos, both directed by filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, both Yorke and Greenwood have had a long-standing working relationship with the director. Greenwood has scored every Anderson film since 2007's There Will Be Blood, while Anderson has directed 3 music videos for Radiohead, as well as the short film that accompanied the Thom Yorke solo album, Anima. It's worth noting, too, that Greenwood actually met drummer Tom Skinner when recording the soundtrack to Anderson's The Master. Skinner played drums in the track Able-Bodied Seaman. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 2 music videos Anderson made for The Smile, giving some background information and providing some insight into what I think is going on in each. To me, the 2 videos present a portrait of post-COVID society and explore how prolonged isolation, unhealthy amounts of screen time, and government surveillance and corruption have led to a fundamental loss of our sense of self and community. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more video essays like this one. We've also done one on Paul Thomas Anderson's History of Individuality, where we get into movies like There Will Be Blood, The Master, Phantom Thread, so be sure to check that one out too. Wall of Eyes, the first video directed by Anderson for The Smile, was filmed from October 24th to 26th, 2023, and released less than 3 weeks later, a very quick turnaround. It was filmed in London at the Mildmay Club and at various locations near the Prince Charles Cinema in Leicester Square. Anderson originally pitched the idea of doing a dance video, which Yorke rejected because they'd basically already done that on Anima. The black and white film, interrupted with quick bursts of color, opens with a solitary Thom Yorke watching a giant eye on a screen before wandering through a crowded city and eating and drinking alone. By the end of the video, versions of Yorke appear variously happy, manic, and depressed, drinking and eyeing each other with suspicion. The band described the process of making the video as a camera geek out, with PTA excited about the technical aspects of shooting on 35mm film and how to pull off different old school effects in camera.
Every conversation was about lenses and how we're going to pull off this. I just had this obsession about multiple exposure things. I was sending them all this sort of 1920s, 1930s experimental photography, and it was like, but then we got into this idea of this technique. It was super fun.
The video employs quick zooms and hand cranks in most of the exterior shots on the streets of London. To achieve the effects we see in the video, Tom walked in slow motion while the film was undercranked, so that when played back at 24 frames per second, everyone would appear to be speeding past him. And as mentioned, the video ends with an elaborate and complex multiple exposure tracking shot. Gaffer Johnny Franklin wrote on his Instagram that they had to expose the same piece of ISO 200 black and white film 16 times. Because they were continually exposing the shot, certain elements like walls, tables, and seats had to be blacked out until the last take, presumably so that they didn't overlap or diminish the exposure. Adding to the difficulty was the fact that the dolly had to be manually pushed in time so that it moved at the same speed every take. Despite all the difficulty, they managed to get the shot on the first try, though as Franklin notes, there are some abnormalities and imperfections in the shot that really just kind of make it more interesting. The track Wall of Eyes dates back to around 2009 when the phrase Wall of Ice appeared in digital artwork along with the release of the Radiohead B-side These Are My Twisted Words. The same phrase later appeared in promotional artwork for the album The King of Limbs, along with snippets of what would eventually become the lyrics to the song. There was actually a lot of speculation at the time that Radiohead were going to release an EP named Wall of Ice, but it never materialized, though there seems to be some allusion to Wall of Ice with the snow that blows into the room Tom is sitting in the opening of the film. On the whole, though, I think the lyrics in the video seem to play on themes of surveillance, social media, anxiety, alienation, and endless self-scrutiny. The video seems to mirror the experience following the COVID lockdowns, where people who'd spent the better part of a year isolated and staring at screens attempted to rejoin society and regain some sense of normality.
You know, the first record was done during the pandemic, and a lot of the energy of that and the second record in some ways is all knock-on still from that period of like the joy of actually being in the room with someone and you know, having a creative conversation with them.
While the process of creating the song seemed to be a joyful one, the lyrics are anything but. They invoke a wall of eyes, a thing that both isolates and constantly surveils us, making us unrecognizable to ourselves and bringing us down a peg or two. In the video, Yorke's solitude and alienation stand in stark contrast to the celebratory mood of everyone around him. As the lyrics say, we neither deserve or are worthy of the sense of triumph that emerged in the immediate wake of the pandemic. Rather, the experience of lockdown, it seems to suggest, has led to people feeling more alienated, more mistrustful, and stuck in a kind of feedback loop of constant self-examination and self-doubt, no doubt brought on by increased social media usage and governmental surveillance. There's also a sense of foreboding, as if the post-COVID exuberance and the rush to return to normal masked a deeper loss, a loss of trust and meaning, a breakdown in our sense of being in the world that has yet to be fully articulated or resolved. As usual with Yorke's lyrics and Anderson's films, the allusions are vague in general, but considering the increase in social divisiveness and unrest we've seen since COVID, as well as the toxicity of online discourse, and more recently the rise of right-wing populism in the West, there's a lot that Wall of Eyes seems to be drawing on. And as the lyrics suggest, the worst may be yet to come, so strap yourself in. This sense of unresolved tension from the COVID lockdowns also figures in the next video Anderson directed for the band, Friend of a Friend. It was actually filmed in the middle of shooting the Wall of Eyes video on October 25th at the Newington Green Primary School in London. Presumably, Anderson shot Friend of a Friend in the daytime and resumed shooting the Wall of Eyes video that night. At first glance, it seems more straightforward. The band performs in front of a group of school children who seem alternately bored and intrigued by what they see. Side note, Tom Skinner's son is supposedly one of the kids in the audience. But dig a little deeper and there's more than meets the eye. The song was originally called People on Balconies, and when debuting the song, Yorke said he was inspired by images of people in Italy socializing with each other on balconies during the COVID lockdowns there.
One of the things I remember about the pandemic was in Italy, well, there's people in apartments, they didn't let them out in Italy at all, like out. And people stuck in apartments, and they'd walk out to their balconies and talk to each other and start singing. And that really stopped me.
Looking at the lyrics, there are a lot of allusions to people struggling to maintain a sense of community in the face of governmental neglect and increased surveillance. Yorke sings about worn-out spaces and flimsy balconies that eventually break, causing people to tumble from them. Elsewhere, he urges the listener to stop looking over our shoulder because we need to get this together. A sorrowful call to action that calls to mind Yorke tracks like Harrow Down Hill. As one review pointed out, the song's allusions to political corruption and cronyism is something that Yorke has directly addressed on his social media when he shared a news article critical of Boris Johnson's handling of COVID. As time passes, more and more stories of COVID-related corruption and lack of transparency seem to be emerging all across the globe. So given all of this, why would PTA choose to make a music video featuring the band performing in front of schoolchildren? According to the band, there wasn't much discussion of the meaning behind the choice. They basically agreed to Anderson's idea right away. That said, I think there are a lot of links between the stated inspiration for this song and Anderson's video. For one, most of the kids you see in the video were probably just entering school around the time when COVID first emerged. Due to COVID restrictions, schools in the UK were closed during much of 2020 and 2021. There are a number of studies that suggest that these closures negatively impacted the social development and mental health of school children, with young children being the most affected. Also, it's pretty well established that COVID was associated with an increased amount of time spent online or on social media, particularly amongst younger people. And this in turn has been associated with a whole range of negative consequences, like a rise in inattention and hyperactivity amongst young children, decreased sleep quality, and so on. Now, I don't think at all that PTA is trying to shine a light on the clinical aspects of how COVID has affected children. Rather, I think the video is much more subtle in terms of how it addresses the lyrical themes of this song. Young children are often brutally honest and unpredictable, and there's something so raw and unfiltered about seeing their reactions to the band's performance. And I think in the simple act of turning a camera on them, he's inviting us to question how the pandemic may have impacted younger generations. Whether the reactions of the kids we see in the video are merely kids being kids, or whether there's something more at play here. By showing their boredom, excitement, and confusion, PTA seems to be asking us to question the lingering impact of the pandemic itself on the next generation. I found the end of the song especially powerful when Yorke sings about money going into the pockets of well-connected people, a friend of a friend, as Anderson features a number of close-ups of children in the audience. Here, I think the music video does an incredible job of linking the themes of political corruption and the effects of COVID, suggesting that by enriching themselves, political elites have squandered the future for younger generations. The final lyrics of the song, "Loose Change," seem to play in a double meaning. First, they imply that society has been left with little but pocket change, a declining standard of living, and a decreased quality of life. But second, they suggest an increasingly volatile world where corruption and increasing social unrest become the norm for future generations. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and check out more of our videos. We've done one on Paul Thomas Anderson. We've also done one on Twin Peaks and David Lynch's Blue Velvet, Vertigo, and so much more.